Hi, my name is Judy and I'm the City Stitcher and welcome to my Flosstube channel. Today is Sunday, February the 27th, and it is a sunny, wonderful, glorious day. Okay, technically there's still snow outside and all that kind of stuff, so, you know, pleasant outside for this time of year for where I am, but the sunroom with the sun is glorious. So no need for a poncho. I was debating even moving into short sleeves. I decided 3/4 length sleeve will do for today. We'll see. But yeah, this room has been lovely. So I'm filming a little bit later than I was expecting because I got completely distracted being in this room and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, here we are. First things first, just want to say my thoughts and prayers are going out to the people of the Ukraine. Sounds bad, but you know, if you watch Flosstube, you know about Luda, and there are others on there, and there are Ukrainian stitchers on Instagram who do amazing work. So I'm, of course, concerned about them first and foremost, not to mention all of the other people of the Ukraine. And it's heartbreaking to see families with little kids sheltering in subway stations. I know it's very reminiscent of, what was happening during the bombings when Great Britain was being bombed in World War II. This is, yeah. I wish I had a solution. I don't have a solution. So I'm doing all that I can with thoughts and prayers and hoping for a swift resolution, and that Ukraine, anyway, thinking about the people and worried about them. Anyway, it's a not great topic, but there it is. So I'm going to move on to stitching, which in the grand scheme of things is less important, but maybe usefully distracting. So a couple of things from last week. Want to say one, Rachel Q, thank you so much for your comment, because it was fantastic. Because her comment was pretty much, wait, did you just say that you're using the called for fabric and the called for floss? I know. You never thought you were going to hear it on this channel. That's why I always like to, spice things up and do things differently. I used all the called for things. Yes, it's probably, yeah, actually that's not true. I used all the things in the Mill Hill kit, and I used all the things in the Taya Gouverneur Jerusalem kit. And the answer is, it's weirdly, yes, that means this is the third time in the life of my YouTube channel that I am using the called for fabric and the called for floss. Hey, I also, because we've talked about this before, that I'm a really great person who likes to talk at my, screen when I'm watching other floss tubers and stuff like that. Surprisingly, they can't hear me and they don't respond. So just, I originally, talked at you, Rachel, at your comment, said, yes, I have been the subject of an alien abduction. And as you can tell, there's something just a little bit off with the clone that they have left behind. Close, but not quite. Anyway, yeah, it was, yeah, for those of you who are like, wait a minute, am I on the right channel? It looks like Judy, doesn't sound like Judy. It was Judy. It can happen. The other funny thing, as I was preparing to do my Nashville order, which we'll talk about in a bit, I was on the Fabrics by Stephanie website doing a couple of things. And, when you're on there, I'm like, I had that moment where I was like, maybe I should order another piece of Midnight Tryst, because I'm getting low because I've cut into my big piece of fabric and I've used it for 2 projects. I have a little bit left, but there's not a lot of Midnight Tryst left in my stash, which is a little bit worrisome because I think it's fantastic. So of course, Midnight Tryst, and here's my lovely piece off of the scroll rods. Here's my Celtic Snow again because it's just lovely. And I'm very careful when I talk about this because this is Midnight Tryst on 28 count Jobelin. And again, from the discussion that Janice had with Stephanie at the time, I was placing, trying to get this fabric from her. The answer was the dye. If you're going to be on an even weave, the dye for that particular colorway took better on the 28 count Jobelin, and I went, sold. So I was on the Fabrics by Stephanie website. I looked up Midnight Tryst. Jobelin is not an option. So new cautionary note, if you were looking at this going like, ooh, I can go to Fabrics by Stephanie and order the 28 count Jobelin and I can get this. The answer is the Jobelin is not currently being offered. Now, I don't know if that's simply due to supply chain issues and her being unable to get the base fabric in Jobelin to dye. I will say that Jobelin has been challenging to come by with the supply chain issues. So I have no knowledge as to the reasons why that is. But so the Jobelin is not an option for Midnight Tryst. There's a really great note on the Midnight Tryst page on Stephanie's website that says, if you get this in an even weave as opposed to a linen, it will be purple, which means it will not look like this, because this is very definitely blue because I'm wearing the purple for contrast. Anyway, so there's a very good note on there. So if you order the Midnight Tryst on a Lugana and you're unhappy when it comes out purple when you receive it, she put the warning note on there, and it's there for all to see. Now, she does say that if you are looking for something that is similar to Midnight Tryst on an even weave, that your better option is her colorway Winter Solstice. So just what I got there is like, ooh, I feel like I've been misleading people. Now, sorry, that's twice. We all know there's going to be a third time, right? It's not to say that, when the supply chain issues are resolved, and given that we're, into year 2, I don't know how long that's going to take, whether or not Jobelin's going to come back or not. And it could be, I didn't go through a lot of it to see if there were other Jobelins available. It could be that she just doesn't have that much demand for Jobelin, so she may have removed it as an option. So now I'm worried I can't get the Midnight Tryst in the Jobelin. It's not to say that Winter Solstice isn't a great option. In fact, I have to go back up and check wonder if I ordered some Winter Solstice at the name is ringing a bell, but I don't know if it's Winter Solstice here or if it's a winter something from somebody else. But anyway, so if you were all excited about the Midnight Tryst and how it looked, that particular colorway is currently not available even from directly from Stephanie on her website. So just so you know. All right, the piles aren't as egregious as they have been, so let's get into my stitching. I will say this has not been my best stitching week because I was totally distracted with trying to get my Nashville order in, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But let's get through the stitching first. So step number 1 is I was going to spend a little bit of time working on my sampler stitches to try to get caught up. So this is what it's going to look like at the end from the Drawn Thread 9-part series. I think the questions are still coming in from people. I caught up with the Stitchin' Mommy's Flosstube this week. She, of course, is the instigator behind this whole stitch along, which is fantastic. I love it. Anyway, if you are looking for the set of 9 charts, I'm still going to say your LNS, if they are willing to take special orders, I can still order it from Witchelt, I think is where they get it from. If you're looking to get it, if you don't have an LNS, or the ones that you do don't take special orders, you can get it directly from the Drawn Thread on their website, and I will put that link in the notes below if you're looking for it. I, of course, have restarted this. So I've changed my fabric to 32 count Silvery Moon Lugana by Zweigart. And I spent some time trying to catch up. I'm not quite caught up. I'm not as far as I'm concerned should have been. And we'll talk about that in a bit. Now, I did bring, or I said I brought, yes, there it is. I did bring the old one, still for comparison, because I'm still at that stage. So you can see that I'm not 100% caught up, but I'm still going not bad. All right, so I have finished all of part 1. So technically I'm calling that a finish. Every chart that is fully stitched, as far as I'm concerned, is a finish. Technically there's a little bit left to go because I need to attach the beads and I need to attach the button. But all of part 1 is done. I've started on part 2. Not quite caught up, but you know, it's Sunday, so I'll be working on this tonight. We'll see where we get to. One of the things of note on this is, so one of the slowing factors on this one, I feel like I'm losing my light, is I went through yet another debate about what was I going to do with my Soie Perlee. You know, because I went through the big debate on the Pearl Gray Lugana, and on this one, I went online and I looked at some color options and what was available in Soie Perlee and blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, I went white. Let's just go with white. And I think it shows up better in real life than it does on camera. And I'm happy with that color choice because I think it does provide a bright contrast in this thing. And again, I'm thinking back to my conversation with Jeanette when, you know, I was sort of saying, I don't think I'm really happy with the Pearl Gray, and I'm looking at other options, thoughts, concerns, things. You know, she's a designer. She works with color all the time. Her colorways and my colorways are not exactly the same, but she can still see color really, really well. And I think one of her comments that resonated with me is because I changed the base color palette and effectively brightened my color palette, you know, and she even said, even on the Pearl Gray, I think you should use white. If you're going to use it for something, go back and restitch it, which is still on the table for how I do something with my leftover. And I think that's accurate. Once I did try some of the grays that I had in my stash, you know, looked at my DMC color card for lighter grays, etc., etc. Did all of that, but ended up with the white, put the white in, went, I don't know about, so I put the antique stitch in correctly this time, and went, I don't know about that. And then I did my buttonhole stitch here for the square, and at that point I was like, oh yeah, no, I think this is correct. Which meant then my decision over here for what to do with the cushion stitch was really easy because I just took out a white Soie d'Alger, which I had in my stash, and started stitching it up and went, we're good to go. So I'm happy with that colorway and how that's looking. So, you know, not 100% caught up, but making progress. So Sarah, if you're watching this video, you and I are sort of at the same spot, because I know on her Flosstube video this week, she said, you know, she'd finished part A. She was technically a little bit behind from where she should be according to the schedule of getting one letter done every 2 weeks. And she's correct. We're a little behind schedule. But again, you know, given that this is a restart, I'm I'm going to try to still work on it on Sundays only, now that I feel that, you know, I'm sort of mostly caught back up, a little behind schedule, but mostly caught back up. I'm still going to say, I think I'm going to go back to Sundays only and see, you know, because when I was working on Sundays only before, I was able to get a little ahead of schedule. So I think if I continue to work on it on Sundays only, I'm still going to be able to catch back up and maintain the pace of the goal of the stitch along. So I'm much happier with my color choice, my fabric choice. I think this is, yeah, changing fabrics was absolutely the correct choice. And as one of you had mentioned to me in one of the comments, saying, like, you've brought this up a few times, just change the fabric because it really is indicating that you're not happy with your color choice, and that's correct. And same goes for everybody else. If you're going like, I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that. Maybe don't work on, like, for me to have invested all of the time to get all of it, all of the 9 charts done on here, and at the end go, would be very disappointing. So much better to make that decision earlier in your stitching. And I've seen other people do it, and I've seen people, I was watching Instagram, Facebook, I don't know, somewhere on social media, someone was like going, I'm 10,000 stitches into a Haid, which is a full coverage piece. And what should I do? And the answer is, if you're not enjoying it, like, stop doing it to yourself. Now, I was fine with the stitching. It was just the fabric choice. So I'm sticking with the pattern, which is great. And I'm much happier with my fabric choice. So here's my sampler stitches, attempt number 2. Okay, so that's that one. And again, as I said before, I was keeping this in reserve because, you know, I could have finished all of part A and went, oh, maybe the darker is better. That totally was within the realm of possibility. That's not what the final outcome was. But I'm still going to try and figure out something to do with this. Okay, losing the voice again. So Charlotte had come saying, yes, maybe you should finish off D. And the answer is I may probably do D, E, F twice. I'll do it on my main piece first, see where we are in the timing. I probably will do D, E, F again on here anyway, just so that I have something that is more finishable. Now, it does mean that I need to get replacement things, right? So to fully finish this off, I need to get another set of beads. There's only 4 of them. I'll figure something out. This is a white button that fits in here, which is totally doable. But as Jeanette has said, I may rip this out and stitch them with white, which will solve this color problem issue. There is a little dragonfly charm that goes over here for D, and I don't know if there's anything else in the embellishment pack for DEF. But again, so in order to fully finish it, I will need to come up with a couple of other things, but I'm 100% certain that that's doable, so I'm not worried about that. So that is, so again, so trying to salvage something out of this, because the stitching is totally fine. And we'll see where we get to. So as I've been doing so far on my rotation this year, is I've sort of been doing a new start 1 week followed by a whip week. And the whips are, you know, depending on, you know, whatever my choice is at that point in time. So I came back to The Banquet, my canvas work piece by Frida's Fancy Stitching. Because when I stitched on it in January, I got 2 charts done in a week. It was fantastic. I was very excited. There's only 2 charts left to go. So secretly I was going like, man, if I haul it out again, maybe I can get a finish. So how did I do on this one? I did not get a finish. Well, I sort of got a finish. So I finished chart number 7 which is this, and that. So that's part 7. I will, so this one actually, so this is number 4. I was just thinking about going, that's not true. I am doing this on the called for canvas with the called for threads. So there's chart number 4. See, it is possible for those of you who think I change everything. I will say, of course, when this was a mystery, I had to wait till the whole thing came out before I could go, okay, no, it was good. So that's part 7 is complete. I did start part 8, which is these Norwich stitches here and this square down here. So part 8 comes all the way, fills in the rest of this, as well as a rectangle that goes all the way up the side, and then there's a border that goes around the whole thing. So I didn't get part 8 done, but you know, part 7 is done, so that's a win. So technically 2 charts finished this week, which is great. A start on part 8. So I am going to finish out February on whips. So whether it is sampler stitches, which is Sunday, it's probably going to be the banquet, and see what I can get done on Monday on this. And then come March, my whole plan for what I'm doing from a rotational perspective is changing. So we'll talk about that next week. The other thing on here, cautionary note, this square on Frida's original design is not a diamond. It's a heart. I think I've said this before. It's not that I dislike hearts. I just don't like having a lot of hearts in my stitching. So if you go back and you think about the February cottage, there were several hearts on that particular design, and I left them intact. I didn't change any of them. They were all fine. Nothing happened there. Because I feel like it's sort of seasonally-esque. On this one, because I go, this is a more year-round, and I expect that when this gets fully finished, and it will be finished by framing, that this will actually be hanging out regularly. And so I changed the heart just into a diamond. And that's usually my solution on a lot of hearts. Just take your heart, change it into a diamond. It usually works out. It usually works out relatively well, unless you've got a really sort of a squat wide heart. It's usually pretty easy to change a heart into a diamond. So that's so I've changed that. So there's my adaptation for Frida's design. Very minor. Okay, and that's all that my stitching was this week. So we'll talk about that next week. I brought something else like, yeah, we're too far along for that. Okay, so what took up a lot of more time than I expected this week is my pre-order for the Nashville Needlework Market. You know, and it's all those crazy people. I was doing really, really well until, you know, so I enjoy watching people. There are several people, Flosstubers out there, who have their thoughts on the new charts that are being released. Carolyn Zook from Zook Stitch has a very long Flosstube where she's actually going through all the things that are on the Garon Stitchery website of the new releases. It's a very long video. Watch it in chunks. Sometimes I had it running in the so I did watch it. Sometimes had it running in the background, and then you have the parts going like, wait a minute, did she just say that there was a chart and it was monochromatic? And anyway, then I couldn't, anyway, whatever. It took me a while to find it when you're not giving it your full attention. But I will say on Carolyn's, I think she had one of the really good things that she did on there was on some of the designs. She actually was like going, oh, blah, 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 blah. And ooh, here's the stitch count. Because there were several items, and I had them as well, where I was looking at things going like, ooh, that looks like look at that stitch count. right? So I will say, as much as clearly I love a large project, I am having a moment where it's like, I think there was one where I was looking at it and was like, oh, that looks interesting. Should I add that? How does that fit in with my things? And again, I'm trying to do my rule of like, does that bump something out of my list? Like, does that actually come ahead of something I currently have in stash before I'm going to pre-order it? You know, and there were a couple of ones where I was like going, ooh, that looks interesting. And it's like, one is like 271 or 284 by, I don't care what the other direction is. I was like going, ooh, you know, right? So size alone on some of them, I was like, pause, stop, don't do that. Sorry, just, I don't know what's going on. I was totally fine. All right. Hopefully that will fix things. Anyway, so the other cautionary note that I will say for people is that don't forget that unless it is a Nashville exclusive, like there are some designers there putting out Nashville exclusives, but they're only exclusive for 30 days, which means after the 30 days after Nashville, the designers will be sending that chart to distributors, which means a lot of the LNSs who didn't attend market can get it. If it is an exclusive limited edition Nashville kit, that's a whole other kettle of fish. And there certainly have been several shops who, you know, again, because I've signed up for a bajillion newsletters from a variety of shops who've said, hey, feel free to put your pre-orders in. We will do our best, but we cannot guarantee you that we will get those because they are limited edition. There's only X number, blah, 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 something, something, something. Right? So if it's one of those items, those for sure I would get your pre-order in. Of course, this is February 27th, which I will generally say most of the pre-ordering dates are up. I was trying to get my pre-order in ahead of the 25th, just in case there was anything weird. And even in my pre-order, I know that there's things where I don't know if I'll get them. Don't know. We'll see what comes back. One of the things that caused me to spend more time when getting my Nashville order together was one of the gracious Flosstubers made the comment that there were designers that were coming to Nashville that are their charts are not with some of the larger distributors. So when I say larger distributors, in my head I'm going like Hoffman Distributing, Witchelt, and Yarn Tree are like, those are the three North American distributors that I always think of, you know, and quite frankly, that if I'm checking for things, those are generally the three places that I go to see. And again, like their websites are open to the public, so I, as a retail customer, can go to any of those three sites and have a look and see what's on there. I can't order directly from any of them. I still have to go through somebody else, but I can see sort of the concepts of what is available through the distributors. But again, this comment was like, there are designers who are coming to Nashville that don't go through one of those three distributors. And I had that moment where I'm like going, ooh, that's a good point. Like, and again, you know, yes, I have an LNS that is attending Nashville, which is Traditional Stitches. So she does have technically the opportunity to meet with some of these designers. So there are some items on my Nashville order from a particular designer that is not available through the distributors. Now, it's an older chart. Okay, they're older charts, which she's going to try and pre-order. Whether or not it goes through successfully, whether the designer's willing to bring older you know, and again, that fits into the category of she'll do her best, but I may not be able to get it. But again, so if she can't get it through Nashville Needlework, this is a designer where it would not be economical for the shop to order the couple of charts that I'm looking for. And I had already checked and looked at the at the distributors and went, these charts are not available through the distributors. The interesting thing is this designer does have an Etsy shop. So I actually had the ones like going, is it worth the hassle to ask Janice to try to get this for me? Although, again, the cost of shipping was more than the cost of the charts because I am an international shipper. I'm an international customer. So, dear my friends living in the US, please don't take for granted how easy it is for you to get access to things and how low your shipping rates are. Anyway, so for me, and again, right, like I'm not willing to double the cost of a chart to get it. I think the value of the chart is good. Doubling it just to get it to me is not worth it. Now, so if Janice can get it, fantastic. It would be really great. And I'd really like if she could get it. But she may not be able to. Now, again, so note to self, it was a really great comment. Note to self that for next year's Nashville Needlework Market, if the same designer is coming again, and again, like I'll be able to check in with Janice and sort of say, like if I pre-order it in whenever they put up the list of exhibitors and go, if I pre-order it in January, is that getting me a better shot? Because I was ordering it towards the end of February. So we'll see again, because it never occurred to me going, look for the people for designers who may have things that you like, that it's hard for Janice to get. Where, again, from a business perspective, it doesn't make sense for her, and quite frankly, usually doesn't make sense for me. Anyway, so I put my pre-order in. I will say that there are a couple of pieces of fabric on there, which again, that also fits into the category of hit and miss. Right, there's already so many fabric supply chain issues going on, and yes, it's really nice where, I can look at the fabric dyers who are attending market and knowing that like they will be out of, I can pretty much guarantee you that the hand dyed fabrics that are there, all of those fabrics will be gone by the end of the first day. I remember again, so the first year that Fabrics by Stephanie went, and I think she had posted something about this where, she took all this fabric to market because she was like going, okay, she dyed everything she could, blah, 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 blah. And, by the end of day one, she was out. She had nothing. So like on Saturday, she was, welcome to roam or have conversations with shops, but she had no product left to sell, which is how it works. Generally, that is sort of what I hear from market every year, even before the pandemic, even before supply chain issues, the hand-dyed fabrics, like, day one, and that was it. So, whether or not I get fabric is, that also fits into the camp of I may get it, I may not get it, and that's just how things work. All right. So that is that's my haul portion of this video. I've placed an order. It has not yet arrived. We'll see what comes back after market. So, again, so market is next weekend, so I won't have it then. And again, Janice is international. She's got a long way to travel back from, etc. And then you've got to sort through everything. And so, 2 weeks from now, if I have it, who knows? And again, I've made it very clear to Janice that I am the good customer, and it's not like I'm not going to have anything to stitch while I'm waiting for my package to arrive. So, when my stuff comes up, my stuff comes up. I actually have ordered something else from Traditional, and again, how it works through the system, it's something, so it's actually a piece of Jobelin because they had it in stock. It was actually on sale, and I went, because Jobelin's getting hard to come by, just get it. All right. So as I say, I always have, there's a few orders floating around in the system, and when the stuff arrives, we'll talk about it when it arrives. All right. And with that, let's get to the topic for this week. I feel like this is going to be a shorter video. Whew! My little gift. For those of you that like the longer ones, I'm sorry. For those of you that like the shorter ones, this one's for you. Actually, that's not true. So there's a little bit of haul, but it directly ties into the topic for this week. So the topic for this week is from Lena, who asked me to talk a little bit. She's struggling with loading fabric onto, I don't know, I'm going, it's like I was going, I think I forgot one of my props. It's okay. There's a prop here. It'll work. She struggling on how to get it onto the frame, and she's got her scroll rods have the webbing, and we'll talk about that, etc., etc. So here, so the haul part of this week is I technically already showed it. It's this particular scroll frame. Now, you may not have paid careful attention. So this is an Arabesca scroll frame. And again, this got, I was talking to a friend of mine. She's like, where did you order that from? Blah, 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 blah. This came from the Ukraine. Anyway, I hope everybody's doing okay. Anyway, so this got shipped from the Ukraine. So I don't know about ordering right now. So I ordered this because I was watching the Virginia Stitcher, and she's got at least one Arabesca scroll frame, and she was talking about it, and she showed it on one of her videos, and I was like, ooh, that's an interesting concept. And you know me, I always like, you know, new things if I think that they will work for me. I don't like new things if I don't think they will work for me. And I was like, we're going to go back to something, because I was like, oh, it's right there. It's because I put my little board over top of it. But, well, anyway. So I ordered this frame from the Ukraine to try. And the reason why it appealed to me is the system is similar to a handy clamp, but it's got multiples of these things. So they're smaller clamps. They're not one continuous clamp. And this is, even on this frame, see, the light's changing again. Even on this frame, there's one more. So it came so that the clamps completely cover the entire scroll bar. But the difference in this system, so I'm also going to show you how easy it is to get the stuff off. Right, so you know, when I use my handy clamp, that I put a piece of ribbon in there so that I've got something to hold on to as I'm getting the clamp off. And that has to do with the fact that on the handy clamps, it's one continuous clamp that attaches. On this one, because they're small ones and there's multiples, they even have a little arrow on them. I don't know how easy. Right, so it's got these little thingies here, but on the end, there's an arrow that says this way. And what it really means is when you're trying to get your clamp off, that's the direction you pull. And it comes off very, very easily. Right? Simple, 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 simple. The difference in this system, and I'm not going to take them all off because I want to keep it sort of, the difference in this system is that in the scroll rod, there is a ridge. And these clamps have that little ridge in there. And so what's happening is when you're putting your clamp on, you're putting the ridge section into that area and clamping it on. Now, I think what this does, you know, so far, so it's fine. So far, I would say it's not dramatically different for me, because I've only had this for a couple of days from the handy clamp. But I think as I do a better job of learning how to get it in, it's probably, like, again, so looking, right, this is how I loaded up the first time. I don't think this is great. I think I really should have, you know, so I started by putting the one in the middle and then clamping down, and I spaced them out kind of evenly. I think one of the things is making sure is that the clamp is over the very ends of your fabric. Check back later, because I am going to reload this. you know, and again, so similar to, and again, so as you're rolling this up, this clamp does stick out a little bit. So I will say, similar to the handy clamp on the bottom part, and you can see a little bit of it down here, I have added, you know, again, another small swatch of batting around, so that as I'm rolling this up, that the wrinkles, again, whew, that light's changing. I don't know where to hold it. It's because the sun's going down the other side. Anyway, so I've added the batting on the bottom. I've got another piece of batting so that, you know, as I roll this up, if I continue to use it on the Arabesque scroll frame, that it will have a whole sentence there. I have another piece so that as I roll it up, I will apply it to the top as well to try to keep it from being too creased. And now I'm looking at this going like, And again, so I'm doing this part again just to sort of say, like, throwing them, putting these clamps back on is easy. So I will say for that, originally when I was looking at it, I was quite concerned, going like, oh, how easy are these going to be get off? And like, they're very easy to put on and they're very easy to get off. So I like that part. So let's talk about loading things onto a scroll frame. So step number one, one of my sentences is, whatever you do, make sure that your scroll frame is long enough for what you're putting onto it. And by that I mean, like, if you've, I'm just gonna use, pretend you're loading a fat quarter, which in my world on even most of the even weaves and linens is a piece of fabric that is 18 inches by 27 inches. Let's pretend it's 18 across the top for what we're loading on. If you're trying to load a piece of fabric onto scroll rods and it is 18 inches across, whatever you do, do not buy an 18-inch scroll rod. Because you need a little bit of room at the ends, you know, for people who are like me, because you can't quite get everything on the way you want. Two, that when you're loading anything onto a scroll rod system, you are going to want that as you're putting it on, that you are holding your fabric at the end taut. And there's a difference between like yanking on it and stretching it versus holding it taut. And the key is to hold it taut. I don't like saying, you know, stretch it as far as you possibly can, because as far as I'm concerned, and this is my personal preference, I don't want to be trying to stretch the fabric, because on some of my scroll rods, and certainly on some of the pieces that I've got on the scroll rods that use a webbing system, they're on there for a long time, and I don't want that stretch it will stretch the fabric sort of out of shape. So I want it to be taut as I'm loading it. I don't want to be trying to stretch it. And again, that's for me, that's one of the key differences and why you see me, you know, roller frames, the handy clamp, and now my Arabesca, is that what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to find something that I can load and unload easier. Now, that's my personal preference. But again, let's talk about loading. So the other thing, and I'm using this as an example. Now, it's a little bit different on this one, because part of my thing when you're using these clamp systems is that you want to have fabric that is coming out the other side of the clamp. But I did a decent job when I loaded this the first time. So what you can see on here is generally the amount of fabric that I have coming out on the other side of the clamp is fairly even. And what that's saying to me is that I have loaded my fabric relatively level, for better use of a different term, right? So one of the things is when you're getting fabric to load, and I encountered this problem on the first piece of fabric that I cut for my patriotic sampler last year, is that I had assumed that one of the cut edges at the top was even. Now, I should know better, and I should know that you need to check those things, but I didn't. And I ended up having to cut a second piece because the top was not even though it looked really nice and pretty, and I kind of looked at it and went, oh yeah, you're fine. It didn't work out that way. So one, making sure that the top and the bottom of your fabric that you're loading onto your scroll frame, that actually is sort of a level, that it has followed a thread of the fabric and is even across the top and the bottom. Now, there we go. So I brought in, so I too have, older scroll frames that have the webbing on them, because quite frankly, for a long time, that's the options that there were. Now, what you had to do is you had to base your fabric on here, which even I go like, that's not my favorite chore. There is, the other thing that you can do is that there is a system called the Easy Base system, and you can get the two, and it's really a Velcro system. And so I have some, there's two parts to it. There's sort of technically the loopy part, the harder part, and then the softer part that they Velcro together. It's not anyway, whatever. You know what I mean. So I do have some in this. I have some of that product in my stash. Because what you can do is if you go like, I hate the basting on blah, 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 blah. So my answer is I hate the basting on too. And so one of the options is to buy the two parts to the Easy Base system and attach them to, because they glue on. It's a glue that is their backing, and glue them onto your webbing. The thing to remember if you're going to do that is that when you are cutting your fabric, so note what scroll frame you're planning on using for a project before you cut your fabric, because I've done that one as well, where I was like, cut my fabric and I went, oh right, this is good, one I'm going to have to mount on the scroll rods, and the only scroll rods I had that fit it were ones that had the webbing. Anyway, I salvaged it, it's fine. But you do want to add, I would say another inch in totality to your fabric, because you're going to be adding the Easy Based product onto the top of your fabric and onto the bottom of your fabric, and again you're gluing it on. Now, depending on how long your project is going to take, like so if it's one of my larger projects, the Easy Based product is going to be on that fabric for, a long time. Which means at the end of the day, generally with the glue is really sort of cemented itself onto the fabric, and you can't get it off, and you're going to end up wanting to cut it off. So if you're going to take your scroll rods with webbing, add the Easy Base system, just make sure that when you're cutting your fabric, you add another inch to your cut dimensions on the top and bottom, not on the sides, on the top and bottom, to allow for adding the Easy Base system and then cutting it off at the end. So for me, I have multiple sets of scroll rods that have the webbing, and quite frankly, that is my plan for if I need to use them for a project, I add the Easy Base system to it. And you can add, you can buy the Easy Base products individually. So whatever you decide your bottom one is, which in my head I always go, that's the rougher piece. And then you can buy multiple rolls of the other side of it so that you can use it on multiple projects, right? So you just have to sort of reload your top piece, because once you've got it on your webbing, your base is done. Now, I haven't done this to all of my scroll rods. Like for example, the one that I pulled, there's no Easy Base system on here because I clearly have not had a project yet where I've been wanting to use this particular set of scroll rods and have added it onto there. All right. Okay. And again, so I'm specifically talking a little bit about webbing systems because I asked Lena to clarify sort of some of the parts of, as she's loading onto a scroll rod, things that she's struggling with. So if you hear me talking more about the webbing based system, that's why. Okay, so if you're not doing that and you're basting it on, again, so I've kept, this is why I also have this one here. Again, you'll also have to decide which way you're loading things. So again, on the way I like to stitch is this, for me, I call this stitching in the ditch, where the fabric, you're rolling it sort of over top of the rods. There are other people who do it the other way, where they roll in the other direction, and so your fabric sort of coming over top, is on top of the scroll rods, as opposed to this one where it may look like it's underneath. And again, many people I know have called this stitching in the ditch, and I stitch in the ditch as well. The reason why I choose to stitch in the ditch is because I just find it easier to, when you're tying off your ends, what it does is it makes the sort of, your fabric is flatter on the back. Anyway, I will say my grandmother and my mother did not stitch in the ditch. That's a new new thing that I have picked up through other stitchers, sort of, and what the benefits of that are. Okay, so that's how. So you'll have to choose which way you're going to roll your fabric around your scroll rods. So for me, because I stitch in the ditch, again, if I'm loading this in, right? So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to try to make sure that I am loading this relatively level onto here. Now, the benefit of this is that I do know that I have a piece of fabric that is level. But again, so you can see, hopefully you can see in the screen sort of how I'm looking at this. And again, there are lines on your webbing so that you can try to, that as you're basting it on, match it up. So again, don't be afraid to treat this, if you're basting it on with thread, don't be afraid to treat this like a sewing project, right? Put your fabric on here, use pins to make sure that you're getting it into a level spot. Because if I pin this all the way across, and certainly I do have a project where, as I was basting it on, I pinned the thing on, because I wanted to make sure that, if I don't pin it in and if I start basting along here and I'm trying to fudge it up and all this kind of stuff, however I'm basting it on, I'm taking this off of a level surface. So for me, for basting on, I do literally pin the fabric to the webbing before I start basting it on, to make sure that I am loading it level. So let's pretend I basted this on. So then once I've basted this on, I should have, let's see how well I do about rolling this. Okay, so then I roll, and I try to keep it, relatively level as I'm rolling down. So I'm going to roll all the way down to the bottom edge of this. So that now I'm down to here, right? Because this is where you're going to try to make sure, and again, so these are the wrong scroll rods, so these are too long for what I'm actually, but these are the ones that were handy. So now as I'm trying to load the bottom, one, you need to make sure that you've got your webbing going the right way so that it's going on, and again, so the same way. So it came on the inside of the webbing on the scroll rod at the top, I'm putting on the inside at the bottom. The important part about this part is that you need to match up your scroll rods. And again, so critical factor when you're doing this, do it on a flat surface where you can totally lay out your scroll rods, right? Make sure that your scroll rods are now even, right? And again, so it's easier to do it on a table, right? So then as I'm loading this on, right, I will know where to start on my scroll rod, where to start basting this on, because I want these two ends. When you put your scroll bar on, you're going to want this to be level as well. Right, so make sure that it's level when you start basting it on the other end. And again, so I would on a table, I would get this together, I would put this across, I would pin my top and my bottom, then pin in between, and then baste so that I knew that they were coming together. Okay, so then the next step on that is, again, as you're tightening this, and I was actually watching somebody else where I said, don't forget that it's going to take, it's like if you're rolling up wrapping paper, that if you're trying to make it taut, that when you're doing this, you're going to have to do it a little, you're probably going to play with your fabric a little bit. And as you play with your fabric, which is why it's interesting to make sure that your ends are taut, is sort of stretching this. I don't like stretching. It's like smoothing this out as you're rolling things up and you're trying to tighten your fabric. Okay. The other thing that she was going like, I'm having a hard time getting my sides being taut. And that does happen, quite frankly, on most scroll frames. Again, I will say the one that I have had the most tension on the sides without needing anything extra is my Omanic frame, but they are heavy frames, and you'll notice that even though I like Omanic, I'm not adding Omanics into, I've added my handy clamps, I've added my Arabescas, because I'm trying to find one that's lighter and just as easy to load. I'm willing to suffer some tautness for lighter and easier to load. I think the Omanics are easy to load, so I guess it's really lighter is what I'm going for. So again, this one again, because I finished stitching on this, so there is some looseness in this in the scroll frames that I've currently got going. So if I were getting this ready to work on again, right? So I've got the knobs are a little loose at the end, right? So I sort of figure out where I'm stitching. I tighten up the bottom. That's not true. Depending on where I am on the working down. On this one, it's easy because I've already started and I know the bottom's where I want it to be. The bottom is tight. And then I would pull it taut at the top. Again, generally when I'm tightening this, I do actually try to tighten it on a level surface because I don't want to add torque into the frame. So as you're tightening it, you're putting tension and stress into this little engineering system. And the risk is, and I have had it on some of them, where it ends up askew, right? So I actually try to tighten my stuff on a level surface to make sure that that it is, that everything is level and as square as I can get it, etc., for what I'm doing. Okay, so I've tightened this, and again, in the center, it's pretty taut. Your edges may always be maybe a little bit looser, and there's a couple reasons for that. One of the things that as you're stitching on these projects, right, as you're stitching, you're putting pressure in the center of the fabric, right, which over time sort of, stretches it out regardless of what you do on the ends. And so, but anyway, so I don't tend to find my ends being that hard to maneuver, but that's me. So if you like it much tauter, there's a couple of things you can do. I have seen people where they're using their magnetic cable ties to tighten their fabric. And I did try this out on something where I deliberately made my sides a little bit loose. These come in 2 lengths, which quite frankly, when I was ordering my set, I don't think I really paid that much attention to, because I was originally looking at these as being things to contain fabric around a Q-snap. But if you're looking at buying these, and quite frankly, I got mine off of Amazon, so just go to Amazon and look for magnetic cable ties, and there will be a bunch that show up. If I were looking to use these, they do come in different lengths, and so for example, on this one, I still could use it. It was strong enough to actually, again, so I tried this. Where I actually had introduced some more side tension into this. On this one, so you pull it on the side, and then, whoops, again, this is why the smaller ones are better. And then use your magnetic tie to hold it into place. And I'm going to see if it shows up on camera. Where? Right, so you would use a series of them. You can see it a little bit here, right? That this is, I don't know if you can see this. So this is looser here than where it is here where the tie is. So you can use these. I would say, and again, you have to know your project. Like if you've got a really narrow band sampler, so think back to when I was working on Lady Scarlet's Journey. Right, that fabric is a long, narrow one. If you didn't have a good size scroll rod for that, if you only had ones larger, you're going to need one that has a larger loop. On this one, if I were trying to add in side tension, actually now that I'm looking at this one isn't so bad, but you'd have to know how big your dimension is because you can get ones that are smaller. These cable ties are stretchy, right? So you can add them in, right? So I can add the stretch on the side and pull it taut down here. So I did try it out where I had several of them, and it did add some tension, where I actually had a little moment where I was like going, does it really add tension on the sides? And so, because I have seen people use them as side tensioners, and it does. It will add some tension into here. Now again, I generally don't find a huge issue with my side tension, and I think it has to do with that I'm trying to make sure that my tops are, as I'm putting them on, are taut. If you go back, so last year I did a YouTube video on tools that I have, and I showed you what I have for side tensioners. I'm not hauling them out. I haven't hauled them out again because I haven't found a place where you can buy them. So again, I've had them in my stash for a while. I showed them because in the tools that I use, because I do have them. My understanding is that you can make them, but if you want to have a look at that, go back and look at. I will go back and I will find out which video that is that I was talking about the tools. I have not brought them out because I don't have a place where you can go and you can buy these. Effectively what it is it's sort of clamps that you attach, and they've got a Velcro system on them, right? So you attach it to your side pars and then clamp them on the side. The other ones that I have seen, again, use a little bit of a stretchy, they clip onto the sides. I don't have these. They clip onto the sides and then you sort of loop them around. So there are tools that you can use. If you're looking for a cheap one as a starting point, I would probably say just go to Amazon and get some of these magnetic cable ties as a starting point and see if that works for you, because it won't be a huge investment. The other thing you can do, if you're looking for those other ones, like Charting Creations, and I will put a link to their site, they do have, or they're able to order in some of those ones, the littler clips. I will put a link to the Charting Creations site if you want to have a look at those. Anyway, if you're looking to add tension onto the sides. I will say that, again, as you get into larger and larger projects, so generally I find, so like in the 20 to scroll rods that are like sort of 20 to 20 up to 22 inches long, I don't find that I have a huge issue on my sides. when you get into bigger projects, so I'm thinking back to my Thea Gouverneur Jerusalem project, right? So I've got 37-inch scroll rods on that one for a piece of fabric that's 36 inches wide. If I were really smart, I think I would have tried for 38, but I think I went with the ones that were available when I got it and wanted to start it. But anyway, that is a project where I do have some side tension issues because the fabric is just so big, right? That is one, again, I try to make sure that if I, as I'm working on it, and I may not work on it for, 5 or 6 hours is probably, I wouldn't do that to that piece, because I do try to sort of keep it taut in the part that I'm working on and put that tension by tightening the top and the bottom. And again, certainly on that one, because I'm not to the far edges, that usually is the area that I'm working on. It will be interesting as that piece develops and I end up closer to the edges, whether or not I have to use other devices. Now again, the problem is I do have a set of side tensioners that I've had for years available to me. That as I said, I did actually spend some time this week trying to find some that I could put on here, that I could say, okay, here's the ones that I have and that I use, but I couldn't find them. Anyway, so again, if you're looking to add the tension, I would say, because I've now tried, again, I did a little demonstration for myself where I took a series of these and added them onto the sides where I deliberately sort of didn't quite tighten it up as much as I could. And it did a not bad job. So I would say if you're looking for a readily available, easily shipped, try Amazon first and get yourself a set of cable ties. If that doesn't work for you, then I would say I will put the link to the Charting Creation site where you can see what those side tensioners are. If you're looking for other places, you can get them off of Etsy from a variety of sellers. So you can always go onto Etsy and go cross stitch side tension and see what pops up. People are always creating different tools. So that's how I load my scroll frames. Again, to me, the critical juncture at the beginning is making sure that you've loaded it so that your top and your bottom is level with the scroll rod itself, and that particularly when you're getting to your bottom one, that you have made sure that your scroll bars are even to each other. And again, I roll them up as I showed you really close together. When I'm putting on the bottom one, I do not put the sidebars on. I load them up so that I can make sure that these are level and then put my sidebars on. Unroll it and then go, okay, now I can load it because I've made sure that these are going to line up evenly. So I hope that helps. As always, if you've got any questions, comments, topics you would like me to address, feel free to put those in the comments down below. And I know I said this might be looking like a short video. It's not. I'm looking at the clock going, okay, we're already over an hour. So apparently I can talk nonstop on a wide variety of topics. Anyway, with that, I hope you've had a good stitching week. As I say, unfortunately, there's a variety of places around the world, particularly this week, where stitching is probably not even on the list of things to do. So anyway, I don't like these parts. Anyway, with that, I hope you have a good stitching week. I hope everybody's staying safe, staying healthy, finding some time to do some stitching. And as I said at the beginning, huge thoughts and prayers going out to the people of the Ukraine and what's going on there. Because anyway, on that slightly depressing note, have a good week, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Feel free to throw comments, questions down in the comment section down below. Take care.